Yeah, thanks guys for joining. I appreciate it's nice to see you all. Some autonomy season 1+ guys, and had a good time putting this one together. This is the October 13th of 1971 broadcast, really getting into Manson and then kind of the fascist regimes and how the things that they want to bring in, and the kind of like disabling the hippie movement, infiltrating and disabling the hippie movement. So we're going to talk a little bit about Manson and his gang and his crimes, and Charles Tex Watson and the murders, as well as get into the fascist piece just a little bit. And she relates it back to the Greek coup back in 1967. So we talk a little bit about that and then go into some of the particular folks. But I wanted to do a fun starter and just have a little quiz. And it is, which 1960s character was also known as Field Marshal Sink? And if you're on the board, you can post your notes here. You can type it in the chat, or I can post the dots up here for you. Do you guys have a preference, a vote? It's okay to be wrong or right.
Yeah,
so we got Louis Tackwood, and we got Evel Younger, and we have Donald DeFreeze and Marcus Foster. All right. Well, I can see we got.
I'm stumped. I mean, I would have probably guessed DeFreeze, but I don't know why. So.
All right.
I'm going to go with the white guy because he's the only one that's different than the others. So.
All right. And the winner is Donald DeFreeze. You got it, Amos. And he was the head of the Symbionese Liberation Army and kidnapped Patty Hearst and went on a rampage. Louis Tackwood was an informer who I believe was also in the Vacaville prison with Donald DeFreeze. Evel Younger prosecuted Sirhan, and I think he was on the Manson case too. I got to go back into this. And Marcus Foster was assassinated by the Symbionese Liberation Army. So interesting characters from the 60s. Just a heck of a lot going on back then, and COINTELPRO and the FBI, the LAPD involved there in domestic terrorism operations, basically. So we'll get into that a little bit. So this is Brussels 1971, October 13th broadcast. And to start out with, on August 8th of 1969, Charles Tex Watson and Sue Atkins, Linda Kasabian, and Patricia Krenwinkel went to 10,050 Cielo Drive and murdered Abigail Foster, Wojciech Frykowski, Stephen Parent, Sharon Tate, who was 8 months pregnant, and Jay Sebring, who just happened to be there outside in the car. And then on the next night, subset of this crew went and murdered Leno LaBianca and Rosemary LaBianca. And I think the LaBiancas, he was like a corporate executive of some sort. And these were the victims at the Tate house, pictures of the victims. So we'll get into a little bit more detail on that as we go along. Charles Manson was found guilty of the 7 murders. Really, Tex Watson did the killing. Charles Manson was set up as kind of the mastermind, the guru, and they kind of painted him as a hippie leader, and May asserts that like all these people are agent provocateurs for the most part, designed to stir up chaos in society and kind of make people beg for law and order just prior to the election. Sounds kind of familiar, like maybe we've seen this before. Maybe in recent memory, some of these things have happened where a lot of chaos has been stirred up by agent provocateurs to influence an election. And she thinks that Manson was a patsy like Oswald Sirhan and James Ray. He didn't kill anybody at either home. And he had been in jail for like 22 of his 32 years on the planet at that point in time. So he was really a product of the penal system. And he was not part of the hippie culture as they made him out to be. Even James Earl Ray, he was in jail in Missouri, and this is a pattern, right? He came out of jail and went on a worldwide tour, spending $23,000 traveling around the world when that was a lot of money. Then he was used as a patsy. Manson was used to slam down on the hippies. This is her assertion, and the media says that he basically brainwashed Tex Watson and the girls to go and do these murders. And she says that, people just don't know about Manson, educated and informed people. They're not interested. They don't want to know the facts. I think that we all kind of run into that. Like the more, quote, education and the higher level of education that you have, the more likely you are to believe what you're told and not to do an investigation. And May studies kind of the misuse of power, all of the aspects of the misuse of power around the JFK assassination, but then she's began to branch out to a lot of the additional assassinations, coups, COINTELPRO events, Operation Gladio in Europe, and the Cold War military-industrial complex, and how capitalism is now kind of disguised as fascism, or fascism is disguised as capitalism, I think would be more apt. So, May is pretty groovy about the 60s. Here she is on the right. She says that the hippies were rejecting capitalism, and she talks about how everyone got along and they shared everything, and they were just going down a road where they weren't going to follow their parents into debt servitude, and everything was going to be peace, love, and understanding. Summer of '67 was year of the Beatles, Haight-Ashbury and Monterey Pop, getting together, to find out what life is all about. And the generation was born with the atomic bomb over their head, so they're not going to live long anyway. So they should just kind of find a way to live and enjoy themselves and do it differently. So it was really interesting. She's coming way from the left, and she would have been a flower child herself if she didn't have the 4 kids in tow. And she goes into consumerism a little bit, and she tracks like all the articles. She has files and files. She reads 8 papers a day, and magazines and books. And she kind of has a file on the hippies, their philosophy, who supports them, who's against them, what was going to be done to stop the hippie movement, because they were starting to take hold. They were starting to take root. And it kind of reminds me of like the Tea Party movement, where as soon as they start to take root or something good starts to happen, they get infiltrated and taken over. And she talks about how the hippies were being handed bad acid, then how the head of the Navy was telling the Vietnamese Navy that the soldiers couldn't have sex because it was bad for morale, and they were pushing down all of these edicts on the soldiers and the people, and how they wanted to transform society to make it basically a fascist dictatorship. And she goes into this book and talks a little bit about Greece, and this is Death of Democracy, Greece and the American Conscience, talking about how the overthrow of Greece, like that's what they really wanted to do here, and that was like a prototype for overthrow in the United States. The dirty tricks and the methods you can imagine, and have a view on all of the dirty tricks that have taken place since the 60s in the United States of America and are still going on today. It's in our face every single day. It's kind of disgusting, actually, if you know what you're looking for. So with the Greeks, they had a coup in 1967. They were going to have someone that they liked, that they considered to be kind of like Kennedy, young, a little progressive, maybe a little left wing, and that a group of generals got together and overthrew that prior to the election. And it was a kind of a right wing dictatorship where they had a set of cultural policies, anti-communism, restrictions on civil liberties, and they were imprisoning and torturing, exiling all their political opponents, which, okay, that sounds kind of familiar too, actually. But they did not have a good exchange of power in Greece. Reminds me of something we just witnessed here in the United States. But some of the edicts that they brought down from the right-wing dictatorship were they couldn't gather in the open country more than 5 people and no gathering in private at all. So the right to assemble was denied, and any anti-national propaganda, anti-war, anything against public officials was censored. No marches or dissent, no beards or long hair on the men or miniskirts on the women. Tourists, and including everyone in Greece, had to attend Sunday church or they could be exiled or arrested. Students were told to turn their history books in and they would be replaced by new ones. So they were influencing the history and education. Racial purity was proclaimed. They put in a Protect Christianity public order. She talks about how this is related to some Nazi public order from 1942, but I haven't had a chance to look into that and see what order that was yet. Then all theaters, movies, everything was subject to censorship. No Beatles, no Bob Dylan, so no progressive music, no Russian music. That was considered bad and communist, and it was kind of the first fascist dictatorship after Mussolini. And she's saying, hey, if they could do that here, then they could do that there. And the United States military industrial complex had a significant influence on the regime over there and benefited significantly over the next years in military and industrial contracts. And I believe they invaded Turkey, or Turkey invaded them. So they fomented conflict and benefited from the war economy. So I don't know if you all are familiar with that. That was, like, I haven't done a lot of work or research into the Greek coup other than being generally aware of it. All right, so she says that, back to the United States, she's saying that, at Altamont, they were handing out drugs and using celebrities to kind of pull down the hippie movement. And she talks about some of the propaganda that they used. This Henry Kaiser wrote a book called Children of Change about the hippies from a right-wing perspective. And he says they would have made it if they had a sense of humor and weren't so violent. Well, they weren't really violent. They were just chock full of agent provocateurs. That's the point. Kind of reminds me of the history of today and different outfits and who they proclaim to be peaceful or against something that we would all say that we were against, but they just get co-opted or used for emotional points. And in reality, they're really destructive. And as an example of that, this has really caught my eye. This guy, Charles Winans, he was an agent provocateur disguised as a hippie, and he moved to Carmel, California, into May's neighborhood in 1967. And his house was a safe house for Manson and Tex Watson. He orchestrated and spearheaded the scenario of violence and witchcraft known as Helter Skelter. That's according to May. And then I found another source that said that this guy, Charles Winans, he moved in next to Louise James, who was a neighbor of May's, and they were keeping track of this guy. So they were like, who the hell is this guy dressed as a hippie? He's from Texas. Something doesn't look right here. We think he's a government agent in disguise, and we're going to keep an eye on this guy. So after the Tate LaBianca murders in August of 1969, about 2 years later, he put up all his hippie stuff. He went to the Naval Monterey Language School. How about that? And Louise, the neighbor, she actually recognized Tex Watson on TV as a visitor to Winans' house. And Sue Atkins met this guy, Charles Winans, through Tex Watson. And according to Sue was a Manson family member who participated in the murders. According to Sue Atkins, he supplied the dope to the Manson family. And then in 1972, a few years later, Louise James, so May's neighbor, was permanently disabled by a mind-altering drug. May suspects that she was silenced for her knowledge. And that's kind of the way things went back then, as far as the silencing goes, similar to the way it goes today. We might refer to that today as Arkancide or Clinton depression syndrome, where improbable suicide by 2 shots to the back of the head, that kind of deal. So she says that the murders were set up to discredit the hippie movement. They had cut the wires, left a bunch of obvious evidence, and split. And if they didn't catch the murderers, it would come down to the blacks and then the hippies. She says that this guy, Shawley, who was a Schick Razor family guy, a right-wing supporter of Nixon, hired this guy, Ed Butler, to write an article about the murders to blame it on the Black Panthers and the communists. Did hate kill Tate? That's the answer. So again, hate or emotion or things that you can't spell out or specify are responsible for this death and destruction. I don't think so. And this guy, Ed Butler, actually worked with Oswald in New Orleans, referenced the Fair Play for Cuba. These murderers, they took the credit cards and they left them in black parts of Los Angeles to try to pin the murders on the Black Panthers. So they were spreading the clues to where they wanted the blame to fall. And then when the facts came out and it wasn't the Black Panthers, you're just kind of left with the hippies and the Manson family as taking the blame for, and they associate the Manson family with the hippies. And that was the whole idea. They pin it on a couple different groups, and when those stories fade, they still have the hippies. It's kind of the same MO as the JFK assassination. Well, it's the mob, it's the Russians, it's the Cubans, it's the communists, it's rogue elements, it's Russia, right? That's the same type of propaganda rabbit trails that they lead us down today with no real destination. That's the whole idea. There's no destination. Manson wasn't a hippie. Sue Atkins was in prison. She kind of broke down and confessed to the murders. Then the police went out to the Manson ranch. And they were self-confessed hippies living in a military-style commune, is what the news reported. And May's point is, hey, hippies are anti-war. Where did they get all this military equipment and dune buggies? And they had the girls have sex with the 80-year-old manager of the ranch so they could stay on the ranch. They picked people up who were homeless or out of their house. They talk about, like, Squeaky Fromm was one of the Manson family members that he picked up in California in the bus. He just noticed that she was homeless. She was 19, and he picked her up and said, yeah, now you're part of the family. But just so happens that her parents was an aeronautical engineer. And she performed with a dance group which toured the United States in the 50s and appeared on the Lawrence Welk show and at the White House. Strange coincidences there. And she just happened to pull a gun on Gerald Ford and go away for many years for pulling a gun, but she didn't rack the slide. So there wasn't a bullet in the chamber, and she didn't intend to kill him, apparently. And that's what she claimed at trial. But she was quite a character of the Manson family, and there were quite a few. Then there's Charles Tex Watson. He ran back to Texas. We'll talk a little bit more about him. He seemed like he had a normal life. He wasn't depressed when he was over there in prison or in jail. He was living kind of high on the hog over there in Texas. But then as soon as they said that they were going to extradite him to California, he feigned mental illness and tried to get an insanity plea, which did not work. There's Charles Winans. We talked about him. So another strange thing is that all these people had like high profile, expensive attorneys. And where did the heck did they get the money for that? He had a big bus. He had credit cards for gasoline, machine guns, walkie-talkies, doombuggies. She goes into it, just calling it out for what it is. Where does the money come from? They have guests at the ranch. It's just like where did a certain somebody get the money for, $3,000 of AR-15s and a brand new F-150 $70,000 truck? Where does that money come from for a guy who's working at McDonald's? Very strange. People have to ask questions. Questions lead to difficult or hard to understand answers, and that's why people probably don't want to ask too many questions. And just like James Earl Ray had money right when he got out of jail, Tex Watson, he was kind of a clean-cut kid from Texas, or so they thought. How did he get into this show? How did he get into it with the Manson family? She thinks that all this planning happened in Texas, and there was some assault that happened out in California by somebody who was with the Manson family, and May interviewed the kid and kind of got the idea that these people were from back in Texas. And when he was there, the big high-powered lawyers traveled back to Texas, and Judge Brown, they found out that the lawyers from California had seen Charles Tex Watson over 40 times in their Beverly Hills office. So apparently this guy has some swing and some money, or somebody's looking out for him. And he claimed that Manson used people. He did magic and programming to get them to do the murders. His lawyer was a Republican National Committee member, saw Watson 40 times prior to the murders. Why? The attorneys flew out there to Texas, and Judge Brown said, "Get the hell out of here. We're going to send you to jail and fine you because you're making a circus out of this show. Or you can just fly back to Texas to get the hell out of here." So they chose the second option, to get the heck out of town, go back to California and keep their mouth shut about the case. This was his first crime, Charles Tex Watson's first crime. He had no record, and he fought that extradition to California. And then he did claim that he was schizophrenic after the fact to try to get out, escape. Okay, so a little more detail on the crimes. And here's Tex Watson, and I don't know if this is Atkins or kind of with which one's which here. But a little more on the crimes. So Manson was never in the Tate and Polanski home where the 5 people were killed. They were gruesome murders, and they were kind of professionally done. And the news started to create this aura around Manson that he was an evil genius and he was controlling these people. He was a magnetic guru. They were nomadic hippies. Richard Nixon and Attorney General John Mitchell kind of get into the act to spread the story. Now people were afraid that hippies were murderers. You wouldn't pick up somebody who looked like a hippie in your car anymore. It was kind of like a hidden war against the youth. It's still kind of going on, right? That's legacy of this stuff is still going on. Joseph Ball, the lawyer for Sue Atkins, happened to be involved with the Warren Commission. Lawrence Schiller, he recorded Jack Ruby's voice for Capitol Records. He gave Sue Atkins $150,000 to finger Manson. And whenever Ruby gave his recording that said that it wasn't a conspiracy, like 2 weeks later is when he died of his fast acting cancer, because they really didn't need him anymore. And Louis Jolyon West went out there to see him, and soon thereafter he was done. That Louis Jolyon West is the MK Ultra doctor who gave an overdose of LSD to an elephant and killed it just to kind of see what would happen. And he was Jack Ruby's and Sirhan's, and I think he saw James Holm, the Batman killer as well. So he was still kicking around back in the 2010s doing his MK Ultra stuff. A very interesting character who we probably should talk more about. Yeah, so all the lawyers overlap. Manson was a pretend hippie. He played the guitar. Like, he learned how to play guitar. He learned to play music. Again, where does he get all this stuff? When I interviewed Juliet Engel, she said that Charlie was a musician and an audio guy for the freak dancers that she was dancing with in the canyons, in the Laurel Canyon scene, the military industrial complex music scene from back in the 60s. So interesting tie-in. And they were kind of riding high with the biggest Hollywood stars 1 year after he got out of prison. They're wined and dined and before they committed their crime. So what the heck is going on here, people? And everything was really good about the hippies. It ended everything that was good about the hippies, and nobody feels safe in the country. That's May's thing. So it's kind of like a strategy of tension, Operation Gladio operation. And here's just an article that we linked to that Manson, is he a victim or a monster? He was arrested 27 times. He spent most of his life in jail. He was a product of the penal system. Just some articles about him. But let's go kind of back to the murders a little bit. So this is Sharon Tate, and she married Roman Polanski on January 20th, 1968. And the murders were committed August 9th of 1969. So like a year and a half later after the wedding. And this Roman Polanski dude is quite some character, and I'm quite certain that this is where Mike Myers got his idea for Austin Powers. They look the same, and as you probably know, well, you might not know that he was in England filming at the time of the murders, and then subsequently at some point thereafter, he was decided to stay in England to avoid pedophile or statutory rape charges here in the United States. So he was quite the character. And I watched a couple of their movies together. One was like In the Valley of the Dolls, and then there was another one with like a vampire movie, and they were really like satanic, kind of nasty stuff. Like, you wouldn't want your kids watching that stuff, or you wouldn't want to watch it twice. It's a pretty interesting group. So again, August 1969, Tex Watson took Sue Atkins, Linda Kasabian, Patricia Kronenwinkel to 10,050 Cielo Drive. Now, where is that? Well, that is, it's like a 37-minute drive on a good day from the Spawn Ranch. The Spawn Ranch is where the Mansons were doing their thing. So not that far. And you get an idea, okay, it's right by the County Art Museum, right in LA, up in the hills, a really, of course, ritzy area. And then the next day, or because I think that murder was actually on the 9th, the Tate murders, and she was 8.5 months pregnant, so about to give birth. The La Bianca family, and he, again, I think he was like an executive at some consumer products company or something like that. So here is Cielo Drive, and then the La Bianca family lived at Waverly, 3301 Waverly, which I'm not sure why they took us all the way around the horn here, but it says 19 miles or 10 miles down. Probably there's a heck of a lot of traffic on this going by the Hollywood Walk of Fame to get to 3301 Waverly. But gruesome, another gruesome murder. And here's the house of the La Bianca murder. And, there's some articles linked in here from Ramparts in 1970. And Ramparts was the article or the magazine secretly funded by John Lennon that May wrote for. And then Los Angeles Times, there's Chuck Watson and Patricia Cranwell. This thing's a little harder to read. And the connection here, I think I missed it, but part of the connection is to this music scene, the Manson and the drug culture and the so-called hippies and the military industrial musicians were all connected. I don't know if you all have seen this book, Weird Scenes from the Canyon by Dave McGowan, pretty popular in our crew. Definitely worth a read. Let me see if I can find that. Yeah, here we go. So this tells a little bit about Charles Watson. So Charles Tex Watson and his buddy David Neal, they moved to Malibu at 18161 Pacific Coast Highway. And then in April or May of 1968, so about a year, a little more than a year before the murders, he met David Wilson, who was the Beach Boys guy. And Wilson invited Charles Tex Watson to live at his house on Sunset Boulevard. And that's where Charles Tex Watson met Manson and his girls and his crew and the family. And in September, Watson went to live at the Spahn Ranch and become a member of the Manson family. And shortly thereafter, his friend Neil went to see Watson at the ranch and noticed something different about his friend. And this article, which I don't know if I linked it, but does talk about how he was taking LSD, and that may have been part of an experiment, an LSD experiment at the time. And I think that a lot of this was related to mind control, MK Ultra. If you dig into it, just the second row, Louis Jolyon West and the whole gang. And I've got him here. These are notes that Joshua plugged in, I think, or maybe Amos, you plugged some of these in, where Manson, he was assigned to a parole officer by the name of Richard Smith, who was part of the San Francisco Project, National Institutes of Mental Health, the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic, which was, the San Francisco Project was a CIA front. And then Jolly West and Roger Smith were both involved with Manson at this Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic on a regular basis. And Jolly's handler, the Black Saucer, was Sidney Gottlieb, a prime MK Ultra figure. And this is Mr. Louis Jolyon West here.
Yeah, the National Institute of Mental Health, that was the front. That was the CIA front. The other projects were linked to, were sort of sub, they were related to that. But the money was coming from the National Institute of Mental Health.
So it was being funneled through that channel
Yeah.
to the sub companies.
Right. And it was all drug research stuff, so like you were saying, the LSD project. So that was a major part of what they were doing in these San Francisco projects and the and that institute and all that. So I'm gonna check out here again and listen to you.
Yeah,
More.
that's fantastic. And I think, Amos, maybe you posted this or Joshua posted it, but the prison interview from Manson, and he was using like prison language, and he was kind of confused. He looked like he was just mentally not with it, and he was asked directly about his involvement in the LaBianca murders, because clearly he wasn't at the Tate house, but the reporter who was interviewing him said that, you went in and tied them up, and then you sent in Watson and his crew to do the deeds. And he didn't deny it, right? You could tell that he was thinking over what to say. And just by looking at him and seeing his reaction, we could see that it was most likely that that was true, like that he did go in and tie them up and send the other people in. But he did a fantastic job of discrediting the hippies, you know. Yeah, and here, if you want to like listen to the episode, it's here. And I think that's about all I have for this at this point. So do you guys have anything you want to toss in there, or any feedback?
I'll just, I did actually read a book, and I'm not exactly sure how long ago it's been, but, I used to go to the library every so often and just pick up books of, things that they brought into the thing. And one of them was on Manson and kind of his, his background and, talking about him being a lifetime criminal, and in the juvenile system as well. And the horrors that he experienced in the juvenile system, that led him to this. Honestly, I mean, he's a a really tortured individual. And, the fact that he got so much support is rather interesting. You look at some of the FBI programs that they've got, for the terrorist stuff and the way that they develop, some of the kind of stooges for the terrorist thing these days. He's kind of a prime example of where do they got to go to find somebody that's that I don't know, easily led to to kind of be the stooge.
Yeah, like people who are under the influence of drugs or the penal system for their whole life, or mentally challenged. All those things make good stooges.
Yeah. I'm kind of going through this thing in real time here because we had a documentary crew down here in Acapulco for the last 7 years or 6 years, and now that documentary is about to come out. They changed the name of the documentary, and of course there were some people involved, and certainly a lot of money that changed hands. And I'm not exactly sure what the story is going to be when they release this thing, but it's actually being released on HBO as a 6-part documentary series. And of course, the main characters out of the 4 that I believe are still there, or they're going to highlight. I'm not sure, because we've had this just seeing it from, they actually filmed at my house. And so I'm kind of involved in that.
Wow.
Just to some degree. I'm seeing this stuff happen in front of me, kind of thing. But they chose certain characters, and I, at that time, I was kind of like, I don't want to be in any kind of spotlight or anything like that. So I'm just going to stay in the background here. But of the 4 main characters that I believe that they still have, 2 of them are dead. And so it's probably likely that they're going to tell a story that is quite a bit different than the actual experience. But they just finished filming this past Anarchapulco, and we definitely had paid actors kind of being involved in that last series of things. So to a large degree, like what actually is going on, there's this like created reality, and it's almost like the survivor kind of where they're kind of, they've got
reality
almost got
show.
they've got this script, but the people that are in the front, they're like the Truman Show kind of thing, where they're just kind of going along and they're being steered by these other people that do have like they have instructions. And and so it's just this, the main characters that are reacting to these other things. So it's like I said, it's gonna be interesting. The release date is the July 10th, and I'm interested to see what is what the story is going to be.
Well, HBO and I think Autonomy people have had some experience with that crew in the past, and certainly Hollywood.
Yeah.
So I might be a little bit afraid to watch that myself.
I'm just wondering exactly how much is gonna, because I asked Richard about this and the idea that we need to have releases, but of course I'm kind of like an anarchist, so I don't believe in any of that legal kind of stuff. So I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to land on that
Yeah.
spectrum.
Well, some way we're not that far away from these things, right? People believe that they don't impact or affect them personally, but we're just not that far away. And I think the last couple of years has proven that. And what May was talking about, like bringing in a fascist dictatorship with all sorts of edicts, I think we witnessed a lot of that recently, and they have a taste for it. So it's not something that we're likely to see go away anytime soon. And the fact that these things have probably been going on forever, and she's pointing them out in the specific characters back in the 60s and 70s.
Well, you were pointing out this like the coup in Greece, and I think to some degree, some of the things that happen have to do with like the government programs that are being kind of put in play, and like them funding those or like having like evidence that funds the program. So like a lot of the things, a lot of the things that get into the news are basically some of these programs that are really just they're just chasing the government money, you know, and 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 so like I don't think all the time that those things actually like they get their money or they get whatever funding and it just doesn't work out and they move on to something else. So there are like programs in the system that are like constantly ongoing, and then there's also players inside the system that are just kind of taking advantage of stuff. I mean, I myself in the military saw a great deal of kind of black market activity that that there was millions of dollars changing hands. There were certainly things going across borders. There was military equipment that was being utilized at Air Force bases and stuff like that, and stuff basic, like transportation of stuff, going across borders and basically, thwarting any of the kind of border patrol or any inspections or any of that
Yeah.
kind of stuff
Well,
that was
just
being done through military aircraft. And it's like so like in that system where you've got this kind of like, it's just basically the sky is the limit as far as what can potentially happen. Like to some degree, it's amazing that there's few things that actually happen as what is actually possible out there, because there are a lot of things that are going on that that just never get in the news.
no. And it just brings to mind like the Vietnam heroin trade, the Golden Triangle, and how they were shipping heroin back in the caskets of the soldiers, and then the Iran Contra and shipping the cocaine through Mena, Arkansas, under the
Yeah.
cover of military and distribution of that in Oakland, crack cocaine.
Mhm.
And I think that it's tied in to wherever there's money, there's going to be potential for corruption. If you look at what Epstein is all about, that's all about the control and the money and the leverage and the blackmail. And so getting leverage, if you think about this whole thing as a big mafia organization, everything makes a lot more sense. Like it makes a heck of a lot more sense.
Yeah, it is. It's to me it is. It's complete criminal behavior, and there's just this veneer of like a illusion of a show that that really is perpetuated by Hollywood, certainly,
Yeah.
because a lot of the things that most people think are really just what they think from movies and TV shows that like make it look like what's going on in the White House, when the reality is it's just you know uh, the veneer, and
Yes. Yeah.
these people are really just actors and people playing roles, and they really don't know what's going on. I don't know. I think there's that Iron Man. Is it Iron Man 2, where there's there's like like the terrorist figure, and he's just like some kind of drunk actor that's like doesn't really know what's going on, but they're using his persona as this like terrorist leader.
Yeah. Yeah. No, another convenient, physically, mentally damaged person, right, to use as a patsy, uh, to direct things through. And I think like that whole Michigan Governor Whitmer plot fell apart because so many people were uh, part of the
Performance.
FBI payroll that they just couldn't hold it together.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the stuff is like that. Um, yeah. Well, fantastic discussion, guys. I appreciate you joining. What do you think you would like to see next? If I said like we could do Jonestown, we could go back to JFK characters, we could do the RFK or MLK murders or other strange goings on in hippie California. Like there's a menu of very exciting and interesting topics that we could pursue from here. And a lot of these, like we could branch off into any one of these characters that we talked about tonight and create a whole other discussion around that. Is there any subject that you came to mind tonight that you might want to explore in more detail next time we get together?
I would say both are, the Jonestown one is pretty interesting. I mean, that does have some very interesting ramifications, I think.
I was thinking the same thing, Michael.
But
Yeah,
I do feel also that the RFK, MLK killings are, it's interesting that it's almost like the assassinations were getting out of control, and they were just like, we're just going to be assassinating everybody.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what she has to say about those particular areas, but those are also interesting to me.
Yes.
Because I do think there was a point, and of course you've got the church commission that kind of comes about because of like it's getting a little bit too far out of control.
Right.
But like, where does that show begin and end? Because to some degree this is all kind of a front, and like
Yeah. And all the people who got whacked with their subpoenas to testify before the church committee, including Johnny Roselli, Santos Trafficante, George DeMorenchild, and others. Those are all very interesting characters.
Yeah, because that is another interesting area is the mafia, because prior to the mid 70s, the mafia has got some serious influence, and it's pretty apparent. Obviously, JFK gets elected, but after the 70s, the mob just basically disappears, and to a large degree they go into like sports betting and stuff like that, and they start owning big sports teams, and
Yeah.
they kind of go legit to some degree.
Hotels and casinos, hotels in
But
Atlantic City.
it's
Yeah.
that transition is very interesting.
It is. I mean, that brings up like J. Edgar Hoover and LBJ and all those characters too, who would be really interesting to deep dive. But I heard Jonestown and I like that. Uh, so we can do that next. And it might take me, I've been excited about that. This, so I pumped out 2 weeks. It might take me another week to do Jonestown, but I'll put something on the schedule, and we'll get into that. And I'll send you guys a link to whatever May had to say about it, because she had a lot to say about Jonestown. And there is a heck of a lot going on there, and some of these characters are tied in and connected to that event as well. So a lot to do there.
Tim,
Have
I did. Oh, go ahead, Amos.
No, oh, no, go ahead. That's all right, Michael. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, one of the things I wanted to discuss with you is, we're trying to set up a time bank, and, we're looking at different areas of how we can kind of support the community. And certainly this really is what I would call an investigation. And it does have value for our community, because I think, you take, hundreds and thousands of hours of information, and you condense it down into a nice little package that says, here's all this stuff, here's some links to all these different things. This is I think it's really an important thing, and it's certainly an important thing for the community, because you've put a lot of time into this stuff, and kind of recognizing and presenting it to other people, I think, is something of value. So what I'm pitching the idea, and of course this is just kind of, we're spitballing a lot of this stuff, but that time that you spent, and the time that the community spends kind of collating all this information, is something that we could recognize as time that's backed by effort. And so I'm just wondering, if you were paid in hours in this new recognition of currency, and the people that came to this investigation and participated in this, got some recognition as far as some kind of community currency, would that be of interest to you?
Yeah, I mean, that might be of interest. It's certainly not my primary goal, but it would definitely be of interest. And the way I would like to see this go is that we use the platforms to create an engaging way of going through history that's not boring, that's exciting, and people can contribute. So it's not just one person like doing all the research. Like when people get familiar with the board and get interested in the research, and we could just throw an episode out there, and maybe somebody else could take an episode and say, hey, I'm presenting this week, and then we can all feed into and develop a culture of excellent investigations. That's the idea.
Yeah, well, I think, one of the things that I think this has the advantage of doing is like a lot of times, we all kind of go down our own rabbit holes, and if we had like kind of the ability to like say, oh, you guys have already gone down that rabbit hole. What were what was the summary of all that investigation? That can save a lot of people a lot of time. And I think that's really, something that I think we've all kind of experienced, that we go down these rabbit holes, and they can take over our lives.
Yes.
And so like saving people from that circumstance
Right.
is certainly one of the things that we could, pitch to people that are coming into our community, is that, you don't have to go down those same things. You don't have to go through this whole emotional roller coaster of finding all this information. We've done that. We've already done that. Here's the summary.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the value that people like May and Richard and other investigators bring to the table is, they're packaging it up in a consumable, and they've done the research. And some of these hour-long recordings that May does, like this one, are so chocked full of information that I have to pause it like every 10 seconds and say, who are those three people? And who are those other people? And I go into the brain model, and then I do the research. So So I'm trying to learn how to become a better researcher and what
Mhm.
sources I can use and go to and what tools. So I think I have some better tools now. And
Yeah,
what I,
yeah,
like, I'd like to know how like Whitney Webb does her research, right? And what am I missing? Like what other sources, or because when you bring it up to the current time, what are those sources that people are using in the current? And that's what May was doing, right? She was using just available sources in the current time to stitch together the patterns that in the matrix that showed her the big picture of what was going on. And
yeah,
she did that service, and she she peeled everything back and then brought it back and presented it to people in a way that they could understand and digest it, and that made sense.
yeah,
And that process is invaluable, and understanding how to do it and then doing it is so interesting and intellectually challenging, and like you say, rabbit holing. But you can lose 4 or 5 hours and just be as pleased as it can be, right?
indeed. Yeah. Well, and I think there's also that, I think, what Richard and some of the others have demonstrated is, that like level of excellence when it comes to like, what they accept as, valid information over baloney. That's another thing that I think, we want to set a high standard as far as like what we accept as, good information versus, you know, eh,
Yeah,
we're in the hearsay range,
right.
like we can't make, you know, definitive decisions
I
on
mean,
what this information is versus this information over here
yeah,
makes a bit of difference.
they
And
told
and
me
so
that
again, I think that's where we can, kind of set a standard of, we're not going to accept bullshit here,
yeah,
but we're going to allow people to, have the discussion.
yeah, absolutely. And like just talking about it leads to understanding, because your ideas get tested in kind of, you might be wrong and somebody might have better information. And by
Yeah,
discussing it, we can create a better understanding together, and you don't have to be right. Uh,
absolutely.
yeah. A- Amos, what do you think?
Oh, she blew my mind again. May did. I mean, I don't. Did you hear this, Michael?
I did listen to this
I
one.
mean, she just goes so deep. I mean, how much time is she putting in? I mean, she's putting in on like a work day,
I think
every
she's putting
day,
in like a 60-hour week, I think. So
every day, digging into this stuff, and like you say, finding new documents to go. I mean, she's an incredible researcher. But yeah, I mean, and the way she pulled it all together, I mean, the Greece and tying it into the times that, the 68 election coming up, where there was so much going on, and yeah, it was just, it was really fascinating. And it's a great tie into what's going on in our lives today, with, the lockdowns and, and the crazy propaganda and all that stuff. I mean, it's just keeps the overlap, and the way this stuff repeats is amazing. It just keeps coming
yeah,
over and over. It's the same thing.
they just recycle it, and then
They
it has a different
recycle.
name. It's the same stuff, and it's absolutely the same stuff. So
So,
once
yeah,
you
so
recognize the pattern, you can't really be deceived again, and that's the idea. What
Yeah, I mean,
when some
go-
25-year-old staffer comes up and says that I heard that the president was grabbing at the steering wheel and wanted to go back to the Capitol, you're like, well, and she looks like a fucking zombie. Okay.
yeah, right. From the back of the limousine, he's grabbing the steering wheel. What a joke.
She's doing her best Sirhan, just how many threats of drugs or rewards did you have to provide to her to get her to go do that thing? I mean, just horrible for her personally, and just to demean yourself, and then to think that people would swallow that stuff. Like, that's what's so ugly, is that and May calls it out, the stuff that they're pumping out, that they just expect people to swallow hook, line, and sinker. And the disturbing part is that so many people do, but the beauty is that so many people don't. So that's nice too.
Very
right.
good, man.
Gentlemen, well, I certainly appreciate your kind attention, and this is a lot of fun. And I'll send something out to you all, publish a recording, and then I'll send you all Jonestown. That will be next. Let's do that.
Excellent.
All right.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, guys.
Great job.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.